Hello and welcome. Today we are jumping headfirst into one of the most wild and fascinating times in a person's life, the teenage years. We're going to peel back the layers and look at the incredible construction project happening inside the adolescent brain to figure out what is really going on in there. You've probably asked yourself this question, right? Or maybe you've asked it about your own teenage years. Is it just about being difficult? Is it all just hormones? Well, neuroscience gives us a much cooler answer. Turns out, all those behaviors we see are the direct result of a brain going through a massive and frankly brilliant reorganization. So here's the plan. We'll start with the teenage enigma, what it looks like from the outside. Then we'll dive into the famous engine without brakes idea. After that, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the brain's big remodel, and this is key. We'll look at how hormones create some really interesting differences between the sexes. Finally, we'll flip the whole script and see why this period is actually an evolutionary superpower. All right, let's set the stage. The teenage enigma. We all know the signs. That constant search for something new and exciting, the way friends suddenly become the center of the universe, and, of course, that emotional roller coaster that can go from 0 to 60 in a heartbeat. So, what's really driving all that? The most important word on this slide is reorganization. This isn't about a brain that's broken or glitching out. No way. These behaviors are the predictable side effects of a brain that is fundamentally rewiring itself. It's moving away from the safety of childhood and getting ready for the independence of being an adult. It's a system in motion, and that motion has a very clear purpose. So how do scientists explain this? Well, what's really fascinating is that it's not just random chaos. It's actually a predictable mismatch. You've got two critical systems in the brain that are developing, but, and this is the key, they're maturing at totally different speeds. And this quote just nails it. It's such a perfect metaphor. Just picture it, a souped-up race car with a powerful engine, and the accelerator is slammed to the floor, but the high-tech braking system is still being installed. That feeling, that mix of thrill and, let's be honest, a little bit of terror, that's the teenage brain in a nutshell. And this right here shows you exactly what's going on under the hood. You have the limbic system, that's the brain's gas pedal. It's in charge of emotion and reward, and it is firing on all cylinders in the early teen years. But then you have the prefrontal cortex, the brakes. This is the part responsible for good judgment, for thinking ahead, for impulse control. And that part of the brain, it's not fully online until your mid-20s. This developmental gap is why a teenager might prioritize the immediate thrill of a reward way more than any potential long-term risk. So, what's physically happening inside the brain during this great remodel? It's not actually getting bigger. Instead, it's getting way smarter and faster. And it does this through two really elegant processes. Let's check them out. First, we have something called synaptic pruning. Think of the teenage brain as a master gardener. It's looking at all these connections between brain cells and snipping away the ones that aren't being used very often. Now, this isn't a bad thing at all. It's a use it or lose it strategy that allows the pathways you do use for things like music or sport or language to become super strong and efficient. The brain is literally customizing itself based on your life experiences. And at the exact same time, you've got myelination going on. This is basically like upgrading the brain's old, slow dial-up internet to brand new, lightning-fast fiber optics. A fatty substance called myelin wraps around the neural pathways, kind of like insulation on a wire. This lets brain signals travel up to 100 times faster. The result? A much more powerful and integrated brain. And this entire remodeling job follows a very specific order. It literally starts at the back of the brain and slowly moves to the front. So the areas in the back that handle basic stuff like vision and movement, they get squared away first. Then the connections between different areas get stronger. And what's the very last thing to finish maturing? Yep, you guessed it, the prefrontal cortex right at the front, the part that handles judgment and impulse control. This back-to-front plan is exactly why we get that engine without brakes situation. Okay, but we're missing a huge piece of the puzzle because you can't talk about being a teenager without talking about puberty. That massive flood of hormones doesn't just change the body. It kicks off a second, powerful wave of brain organization. And this is where we start to see some really fascinating differences pop up between boys and girls. The most important thing to get here is that these hormones are not just floating around. They are active architects of the brain. They have landing spots or receptors all over the brain, and when they lock in, they help permanently shape and structure neural circuits. And they influence everything from our stress response to our motivation in ways that can be pretty distinct from males and females. And you can really see that divergence here. In boys, the big surge in testosterone has a major effect on brain areas like the amygdala and the reward system. This can ramp up the drive for social status and make risk-taking feel even more rewarding. In girls, estrogen receptors are packed into the hippocampus, which is huge for learning and memory. This can strengthen those circuits, but it can also lead to heightened emotional sensitivity. And these hormonal differences lead to real, measurable changes in the brain. For instance, the pruning of dopamine receptors, that's part of the reward system, is generally more intense in boys. Certain brain structures, like the caudate, tend to be relatively larger in girls. Even the way the brain handles stress begins to diverge, with rising androgens in boys possibly dampening the stress response, while estrogens in girls might actually amplify it. It's fascinating stuff. Now, after hearing about an imbalanced brain, all this pruning, and a flood of hormones, it is so easy to think that the teenage brain is somehow flawed or defective. But what if that is completely the wrong way to look at it? What if all this chaos isn't a weakness, but actually a profound strength? This is the big twist. That whole period of change isn't a bug, it's a feature. The teenage brain is in a state of what scientists call heightened plasticity. That just means it's incredibly flexible, absorbent, and ready to learn. This isn't a mistake in our design. It's an evolutionary masterpiece built for one critical job: to help us learn how to leave the safety of home and successfully launch into the complex adult world. So I want to leave you with this idea. What if that risky behavior is actually the brain pushing a young person to explore, to try new things, to move outside their comfort zone? What if that intense focus on friends is actually helping them build the social skills and alliances they'll need for the rest of their lives? Maybe the teenage brain isn't a work in progress that's broken. Maybe it's a brain that is perfectly and powerfully becoming exactly what it needs to be.